Hamburg, Germany, May 3, 1945. The war is over. But the Klein family doesn't know that. To them, the world is still ending. They have spent 16 days trapped beneath the broken foundation of their own home, huddled in a basement that smells of rotting concrete, dirt, and fear. The city around them has been leveled by bombs. Whole neighborhoods have vanished into blackened ruins. The only things left standing are the memories of fire and the echo of sirens. Helga Klein is 7 years old. She doesn't feel hunger anymore. She remembers starving used to hurt, like knives in her stomach. But that pain faded 2 days ago. Now she just feels numb, like her body is slowly shutting itself off. She presses closer to her mother in the darkness. Beside her, her siblings breathe shallow, quiet breaths. Margaret Klein holds little 4-year-old Anna against her chest, one hand clamped over the girl's mouth to keep her from whimpering. 10-year-old Greta and 11-year-old Klaus sit side by side, eyes huge and terrified. It's the third day without water. No one speaks. Talking wastes energy. Above them, footsteps echo across broken stone, but not just footsteps. Boots, heavy American military boots. Klaus had learned the sound by listening through the floorboards. He whispered it to his sisters like it was a law of survival. American boots have rubber soles. They squeak. Friedrich, the father, stands at the front of the basement in front of his family, like a shield with nothing to offer. He was an accountant before the war. Not a soldier, not even political. Just an ordinary German man who believed the radio because everyone did. The propaganda had been relentless. Posters everywhere. American soldiers as criminals, monsters, rapists. Goebbels himself had promised on the airwaves that the Americans would kill every German man, defile every German woman, steal every child. Better to die in hiding than be found. So Friedrich built a barricade of broken bricks and collapsed wood over the entrance and led his family underground. He believed it was the only way to save them. But now the Americans were here. The boots come to a stop just above them. The silence is suffocating. Margaret's heart hammers in her chest. Greta squeezes her mother's hand so tightly her knuckles turn white. Klaus holds his breath. Then the boards shift. A military canteen drops through the gap first. Then a cloth parcel. Then a face, young, brown-skinned, wearing an American helmet. A rifle hangs from his shoulder, but he doesn't lift it. Private Daniel Rodriguez. He doesn't shout. He doesn't kick the barricade apart. He crouches down slowly, eyes adjusting to the dim light. He sees them, all 6 huddled in the back of the basement like a nest of frightened animals. And instead of raising his weapon, he sets the things he brought onto the floor. He opens the cloth. Hot bread. Steam curls into the cold air of the basement. The smell hits them like a memory of heaven. Not stale crumbs, not mold. Bread. Fresh. Real. He opens a second bundle. Meat. Actual meat. A tin of beef stew, still warm from whatever fire he cooked it on. The children stare like they're staring at a miracle. Friedrich is frozen. His hands shake. His mouth opens, but no words come out. The American soldier finally speaks. His voice is soft, gentle, almost shy. I came to help. They don't understand the English. The only word Friedrich manages is a strangled German whisper. Why? Rodriguez doesn't answer. Instead, he looks at the children, one by one, slowly, carefully, not as enemies, not as Germans, as children. He pushes the food a little closer to them, and then he leaves. No gunfire, no arrest, no violence. Just silence and a warm pot of stew left in a basement full of people who had been taught to expect death. For a long moment, no one moves. It doesn't feel real. It feels like a trick, a trap, a hallucination brought on by starvation. Friedrich stares at the bread. He expects smoke. He expects poison. He expects anything except kindness. Papa, Greta whispers, voice barely audible. Please. No, he says, not yet, not until... But he can't finish the sentence. His throat closes. Margaret's voice slices through the fear. Look at our children. Anna is staring at the food like a starving animal. Greta's lips tremble. Klaus looks at his father the same way a drowning person looks at land. If it's poison, Margaret says quietly, then we die with full stomachs. I prefer that. Friedrich closes his eyes. This is not how the world is supposed to work. Americans are monsters. They kill Germans. They hate us. He's been told this every day for years. But the truth is steaming in front of him, smelling like home, smelling like life, smelling like hope. He makes his choice. Yes, he whispers, we eat. It is the best meal they have ever tasted, and it is the moment everything they believe begins to break. The Klein family doesn't die. They don't get sick. They don't fall over gasping. Nothing happens except the warmth of the food spreading through their bodies like sunlight. For the first time in days, little Anna laughs. A weak, cracked giggle, but a real one. Friedrich sits in the corner long after the others fall asleep, staring at the empty tin, replaying the moment in his head. Why would an American risk helping them? He doesn't have an answer. But the next day, at the same time, the answer comes back. Boots again. The same slow approach across broken stone. The same pause over the basement. The same careful movement of hands, clearing the rubble. Rodriguez ducks down into the darkness again. This time he has something different. Beans and rice, still warm, and a fresh canteen of water. He smiles awkwardly, unsure of how welcome he is. And again, he sets the food down without raising his rifle. You okay? He says in broken German. Kids okay? Friedrich can barely speak. His mind is still twisted around the propaganda he believed for years. His voice is dry and cracked. Why? Why do you come? Rodriguez doesn't answer. He just nods once and slips away again. This time, they eat immediately. For the next 3 days, it repeats. Every afternoon, Rodriguez returns. Sometimes with rations from the mess tent. Sometimes with bread and fruit. Sometimes with his own food. On the 5th day, Friedrich stands up when Rodriguez arrives. He finally needs to understand. He steps forward, blocking the path to his family. Why are you helping us? Why? The American struggles with the language. He switches between English and broken German. I know hungry, he says. He taps his chest. I was boy, Depression time, Texas, no food. He opens his coat and pulls out a photograph folded carefully between paper, a black and white picture of a small house and 3 people in front of it. Poor, tired, smiling. My family, he says. We were hungry too. Friedrich stares. The posters showed American soldiers as gangsters. The radio called them savages. The man standing in front of him looks like nothing the propaganda promised, just a young man far from home. Rodriguez continues slowly. One day, man from town comes. White man. He brings food, bread, milk. His voice softens. My mother cries. She says, why you help us? We are Mexican. He hesitates, remembering. And the man says, I knew hunger once too. He points to the Klein children. They are not soldiers. They are just kids. The basement is silent. Friedrich doesn't move. He doesn't thank him. He doesn't know how. He just lets the American leave again. That night, he lies awake with a truth so heavy, it feels like a weight pressing against his chest. Everything he'd been taught might be a lie. By the 2nd week, Rodriguez becomes more than just a stranger with food. He becomes the only thing keeping the Klein family alive. They begin waiting for the sound of his boots. Anna calls him the food man in German. On the 10th day, he brings apples, real fresh apples. Anna shrieks with joy and bites into hers like it's the first fruit she's ever seen. Rodriguez watches her with an expression Friedrich can't place. Something between relief and heartbreak. On the 12th day, Klaus finally speaks to him. You won't hurt us? He asks in German. Rodriguez shakes his head. No. Klaus stares at the rifle slung across his shoulder. But you could. Rodriguez sighs. I don't want to. 3 words. The simplest ones. And yet they cut deeper than any weapon. By the end of the second week, Friedrich's fear has evolved into something else. Doubt. He had been so certain, so firm, so convinced that hiding until they starved was safer than surrender. He had been willing to let his family die rather than trust the enemy. And yet here they were, alive because of an American who didn't even know their names. The big change comes on the 14th day. Rodriguez doesn't bring food. He brings something else. A bar of soap and a towel. You need wash, he says. You smell. Americans smell you. They find you. He motions toward the street above. Water. I show you. I look for soldiers. Safe. He stands guard while Margaret washes the children in a broken stone trough 3 streets over. He turns his back, protecting their privacy. Friedrich watches this young soldier, this supposed monster, help his wife and children wash years of fear and dirt from their skin. It makes no sense. No propaganda, no radio broadcast, no poster ever prepared him for this. When they return to the basement, Rodriguez smiles shyly and hands Greta her towel. You are safe today. He touches his chest again. I know hungry. Then he leaves. And Friedrich sits there in the dark, staring at the piece of soap in his hand and thinks about all the things he might have been wrong about. Not just about America, but about everything. Because in a world where your enemy brings food and guard duty and clean water for your children, maybe the enemy was never who they told him it was. By the 3rd week in the basement, everything has changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically. The change comes the way sunlight does, slowly, gently, in small degrees. One day you wake up and realize the darkness isn't total anymore. Rodriguez doesn't just drop food and leave now. He lingers. He checks the children. He listens when Margaret talks. He laughs when Anna tells him something in broken German, even when he doesn't understand the words. He has become the strangest kind of miracle. A routine in a world without rules. One afternoon, while the kids eat the daily ration of soup and bread, Friedrich watches Rodriguez sitting cross-legged near the doorway, helmet off, wiping sweat from his brow. The soldier looks exhausted. His face is lined with dirt and sun, with the kind of fatigue that only comes from long marches and long wars. And that's when Friedrich finds the courage to ask the question that's been building in his chest. Do you do this every day? Rodriguez hesitates, then nods. Yes, every day. You risk punishment? Rodriguez shrugs. Maybe. Why? Why would you help us? We were the enemy. The American looks up at him with steady brown eyes. I told you, he says simply. I remember hungry. But he doesn't stop there. He searches for the words. Slow, clumsy, but honest. In Texas, when I was a kid, we had nothing. Depression was bad. We lived in a shack. Sometimes no food, only tortillas, flour and water. He pauses, choosing his German carefully. One day, a man we never met came to our house with bread, beans, milk. His voice softens. My mother cried. She said, "Why you help us? We are Mexicans." Rodriguez gestures around the ruined basement. I saw the same in your children. He points to Greta, braiding Anna's hair. Klaus, practicing English words. Helga, clutching the wooden beam like a doll. I cannot fix the war, he says, but I can fix this. He taps the floor. I can feed these kids today. The words hit Friedrich like a punch. All his life, he had followed rules, numbers, orders, logic. And yet this man, this young soldier from Texas, speaks a truth deeper than any rule, any nation. Because war had tried to make them enemies. But hunger made them human again. That night, the basement becomes a classroom of honesty. Friedrich gathers his family and tells them everything. About what the propaganda said, about how he believed every word, about his fear, his certainty. We thought the Americans would kill us, he admits. Klaus looks furious. They lied to us. Yes, Friedrich says quietly. They did. But why? Greta asks. There is a tremor in her voice. Fear mixed with something else. Betrayal. They wanted us afraid. Margaret says the next part. They wanted us to hate. Silence settles like dust. Anna, small and tired, asks the simplest question. What if the radio lied about everything? Friedrich swallows hard. I think it did. And for the first time in his life, he says the words out loud. We were wrong. It is the hardest sentence he has ever spoken. But it is also the one that sets him free. Days pass. Rodriguez brings bread, fruit, water. Once, he brings a little bag of sugar, and the children think it is treasure. Anna claps her hands. Klaus grins. Greta cries. By the fourth week, the basement no longer feels like a coffin. It feels like a waiting room for a second chance. And then one afternoon, Rodriguez arrives with news. No more hiding, he says. Refugee services are coming. British will help you. Food, papers, house. The words are unbelievable. A future. A real one. Beds, walls, windows. Not this. Leave the basement, Rodriguez urges. Come outside. Friedrich isn't ready. His mind still holds the old fear like a memory of trauma. What will happen to you, he asks. Rodriguez shrugs. Maybe nothing. Maybe lose 1 month's pay. He smiles. Worth it. Anna clutches his sleeve. You come back? He kneels. Not here, but I will see you again. He is wrong. He will see them again much sooner than he expects. The next morning, the Klein family emerges from their hiding place. They step into the sunlight like survivors stepping out of the underworld. The air smells like dust and ashes, but it also smells like hope. Rodriguez walks at their side until they reach the refugee camp. He speaks for them. He protects them. He watches as the officials register their names. Then he does something unexpected. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small wooden carving, a bird in flight. He kneels and presses it into Anna's hands. For you, he says, so you remember. Someday you fly again. Anna curls her fingers around the bird like it's the most precious thing she's ever held. Margaret tries to speak English. Thank you. Rodriguez gives a small smile, his voice quiet. You are safe now. And for a moment, Friedrich sees him not as a soldier, not as an American, not as the enemy he once feared, but as the man who saved his family. And something inside Friedrich breaks, not in pain, but in awakening. Everything he believed about war shifts, because the man he feared the most turned out not to be a monster, but a friend. 6 years pass like the slow changing of seasons. There is no sudden transformation, just years of rebuilding. Brick by brick, breath by breath, truth by truth. Hamburg rises from the ashes. So do the Kleins. They move out of the refugee camp and into a small apartment. It isn't much, but it has windows and a real door and light. It has a kitchen where Margaret cooks meals that don't come from tin cans. It has beds where the children sleep without fear of bombs or boots. It has hope. But the world they step into after the basement is not simple. At school, Klaus and Greta learn things no German child had ever been allowed to learn. New textbooks, new teachers, new stories, not about German greatness, not about victory and nationalism, but about camps, about extermination, about the final solution, about the unspeakable truth that their leaders had hidden. One day, Klaus comes home pale and silent. He has seen photographs from Bergen-Belsen, piles of bodies stacked like wood, faces twisted in hunger and death. Not soldiers, not enemies, civilians, families, Jews, children the same age as Anna. That night at the dinner table, he says it out loud in a voice small and broken. They told us it was lies, but it was all true. Greta begins having nightmares. Margaret cries quietly when she thinks no one can see. Even Friedrich, who thought he had already faced every difficult truth, finds himself reading newspaper accounts of the Nuremberg trials and shaking. They had known war was terrible. They had not known it was monstrous. And in that realization is the turning point. Because the family who had once believed propaganda now becomes the family determined to fight it. One evening, Friedrich gathers his children around the table. "We believed lies," he says. "We believed them because they were easier to believe than the truth." Klaus looks up. "But we know better now." "Yes," Friedrich says. "And knowing better is the beginning of change." It is not a speech about guilt. It is a lesson in responsibility. The years shape the children in different ways. Klaus grows into a serious, curious young man. He devours books on history and politics and diplomacy. He studies not just wars, but the reasons wars begin, the psychology of hatred. "One day," he says, "I want to help prevent this from happening again." Greta chooses a different road. She becomes a teacher. She wants to tell the truth about the war. Not the glorified version, not the comfortable version, but the real one. "Children deserve honesty," she says, "so they don't repeat our mistakes." Helga dreams of being an artist. She wants to show the world what she lived through. Not just the hunger, not just the fear, but the moment Hope walked into a basement, dressed in an American uniform. And little Anna never lets go of the wooden bird. She carries it with her everywhere. To school, to bed, to church. The bird is more than a toy. It is a memory carved in wood. A reminder that kindness is real, even in the darkest places. Then, in 1951, a letter arrives from Texas. It is written in careful handwriting and addressed to Friedrich. "Dear Friedrich, I hope this finds you well. I think of your family often. I wonder about Anna. I wonder if she still has the bird. My father needs help. The farm is small, but we have land. We have room. We have work. If you want to come to Texas, I can offer you housing, food, a future. It is a long way to travel, I know. But if you want another chance, the door is open. Your friend, Daniel Rodriguez." Friedrich reads the letter to his family. The reaction is immediate. Klaus wants to go. He wants to see the country that helped them survive. Greta worries about leaving home. Helga is full of questions. Anna asks the only question that really matters. "Will we ever be hungry again?" Friedrich answers without hesitation. "No, never again." They talk about money, about distance, about fear. But none of that is the real reason they decide. They go because a man saved them. And now he is offering something even greater. A future built not on fear, but on friendship. So, in late summer of 1951, the Klein family stands on a train platform in Texas, stepping into heat they have never felt before. The air is thick with dust and sunlight. The land is wide and endless. And waiting for them is Rodriguez. He looks older, yes. But the eyes are the same. The careful eyes that once peered into a basement and saw children instead of enemies. Anna runs to him and throws her arms around his waist. "I kept it," she says in English. She opens her hand. The wooden bird is worn smooth from years of holding. Rodriguez kneels. His voice is thick. "Good," he says. "Birds should be kept safe until they can fly." Friedrich steps forward. He doesn't have propaganda in his head anymore. He doesn't have fear in his eyes. He has gratitude. Rodriguez smiles and says 4 words that change everything. "Welcome home, my friend." And in that moment, the war finally ends. Not on the battlefield, but here, on a dusty train platform in Texas, where kindness finishes what violence could not. Texas is not easy. The summers are brutal, the land is rough, and the work on the Rodriguez farm is backbreaking. But the Kleins do not complain. After surviving hunger and war, after living in a basement for 16 days, after watching their world collapse, hard work feels like a blessing. 2 families become one. Margaret learns to make tortillas. Rodriguez's mother learns to make sauerkraut and schnitzel. The smell of garlic and onions mixes with the scent of fresh bread. The Klein and Rodriguez children grow up together, speaking a mix of English and German and Spanish, laughing in 3 languages. They eat dinner together around the same table. They share holidays and weddings. They bury loved ones and hold new babies. They build a new life together. Not German, not American, not Mexican, but something beyond borders. They build family, and because tragedy has shaped them, the Kleins carry something inside that few others understand, a determination that the past must not be repeated. Years pass, the children grow up. Klaus graduates from the University of Texas in 1955. His thesis is about the psychology of dehumanization, how governments convince ordinary people to hate, how propaganda turns neighbors into enemies, how fear turns people into weapons. He dedicates the thesis to one man, to the soldier who saw children when the world saw enemies. Greta becomes a history teacher. Her classroom walls are covered in photographs, diagrams, maps. She refuses to let her students learn a sanitized version of the past. She teaches them the truth, not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Helga becomes an artist and publishes a book for children called The Food Man. On the final page, there is a drawing of a bird in flight. It sells modestly, but teachers everywhere use it. Because the story is simple and true, kindness spreads, and Anna grows into a gentle, thoughtful woman. She still has the wooden bird. She keeps it on her nightstand, and when she marries, she brings it into her new home. When she has children of her own, she tells them the story of the American soldier who saved her life. She never lets them forget. The years roll on like a long highway. The world changes again. Germany rebuilds. America fights new wars. People forget old scars. But the Kleins do not forget, because every good thing in their lives, every meal, every laugh, every child, every breath of peace, can be traced back to one moment, one young soldier choosing kindness instead of indifference. By 1982, Friedrich is an old man with silver hair and a quiet smile. He is a grandfather now, 5 times over. His children and grandchildren are American. They speak English with Texas accents. They work in offices and on farms and in schools, but they are still Klein. And on his deathbed, Friedrich asks to see Rodriguez one last time. The old soldier arrives, still strong despite the years. He sits beside the bed, and for a long time, neither man speaks. Some things do not need words. Finally, Friedrich reaches for his friend's hand. "I thought you were going to kill us," he whispers. "That first day, I was told you were a monster." Rodriguez nods. "I know. But you came anyway. You brought food anyway. You saved us anyway." Rodriguez shakes his head. "I just gave you a meal." "No," Friedrich says with a weak smile. "You gave us life." He squeezes Rodriguez's hand. "You broke the lie. You gave us back something the war had taken away." "What was that?" Rodriguez asks softly. "My humanity." Rodriguez stays with him until he takes his last breath. At the funeral, Klaus stands in front of 2 families, intertwined so tightly that no one can tell where one begins and the other ends. "My father believed the most powerful force on earth is not a gun, not a bomb, not a government, not propaganda," he says. "It is the simple choice to see another human being as human." He looks at Rodriguez. "He taught us that." Years later, when Rodriguez grows old and prepares his will, he does something no one expects. He donates the bird. He sends it to the Holocaust Museum in Houston, along with a handwritten letter. "I was just a private from Texas. I could not fix the war. But I could fix this. I fed those children because I remembered hunger. I remembered what hunger does to the soul." I hope people remember that one act of kindness can change a life. Sometimes it can change the world. The bird sits under soft lights. People from all over walk past it. They do not know the whole story, they do not know the names, but they feel the weight of it. Because the truth is simple and universal. Wars end, but the choices we make during them last forever. Rodriguez was not a hero by rank or medal. He was a hero because he chose to see people instead of enemies, children instead of Germans, hunger instead of hate. He chose to be human, and in the end, that choice changed two families, two countries, and generations to come. Houston, Texas, 1995. The museum is quiet the morning the artifact arrives. The curators expect another donation, another uniform, another medal, another fragment of a war that ended half a century ago. But what they receive is nothing like that. It is a small wooden bird, simple, unpolished, worn smooth from decades of being held in someone's hand. Too plain to be art, too fragile to be a toy, too old to be anything but a memory. And attached to it is a letter. They read the letter in silence. They read about the basement in Hamburg. They read about the starving children. They read about the Mexican-American soldier who chose humanity when the world chose hate. And they read his name, Private Daniel Rodriguez. There is no record of Rodriguez winning a medal. No record of a promotion. No mention in history books. No statue. No parade. He was just one soldier among millions. Just a private, but not to the Klein family. To them, he was the moment history turned. People from schools and universities and military bases visit the museum. They come to see tanks and uniforms and weapons. They come to see destruction. But when they walk past the small glass case holding the wooden bird, something changes. They stop. They lean closer. They read the letter beside it, and they begin to understand. The bird represents something that almost never makes it into history books. Not strategy, not battles, not treaties, but something quieter. The moment when hatred broke. The moment when propaganda failed. The moment when an American soldier saw a starving German child and thought, not today, not this one, not this family. Years later, classes of school children stand in front of that display. Their teacher tells the story the way Friedrich once told his children, the way Anna once told hers. This story reminds us that kindness is not small, it is powerful. They learned that the war did not end with the surrender of Germany. It ended in the hearts of ordinary people who chose compassion over vengeance. The bird becomes a symbol passed from one generation to the next. A lesson wrapped in wood and memory. You do not have to fix the world. You only have to fix the moment you are in. Anna visits the museum with her granddaughter. Her hair is silver now. Her hands are wrinkled. But when she looks at the bird, she is 7 years old again in a basement. She reaches out and touches the glass. Her granddaughter watches her carefully. Is that really yours? It saved my life, Anna says. Who carved it? A soldier. What did he do? Anna takes a deep breath. He listened to the part of himself that still believed in kindness. The girl is quiet for a moment. Then she asks the question no one in school textbooks ever asks. Why did he help you? Anna answers the same way Rodriguez once did. He remembered what hunger felt like. And in that moment, a truth travels forward in time, just like the bird itself. The smallest act of mercy is greater than the most powerful weapon. Some stories end when the characters die. This one does not. Because Rodriguez's act of kindness did not stop at the basement or at the farm or at the funeral. It kept going. It shaped Klaus into a scholar who fought against dehumanization around the world. It shaped Greta into a teacher who raised entire generations on truth instead of fear. It shaped Helga into an artist who painted hope. It shaped Anna into a woman who taught her family that kindness is never wasted. It shaped the way their children and grandchildren saw the world. And when those children grew up, they passed the story along to their own. The war ended on paper in 1945, but it ended in the hearts of two families on a dusty platform in Texas. Many years later, when historians ask what ended the war, they list the big things: armies, generals, treaties, governments. But those things did not save the Klein family. A private did. They say history is written by the powerful, but sometimes history is rewritten by someone who refuses to look away, someone who remembers hunger, someone who remembers humanity, someone who chooses compassion in a world that rewards cruelty. The wooden bird still sits under soft museum lights. Tourists walk past it without realizing how heavy it is. Not in weight, but in meaning. It represents one truth that remains unchanged through every war, every generation, every nation. The enemy is never the person. The enemy is the lie that says they are not human. That lie can be loud. It can come from radios, posters, governments, flags, and uniforms. It can divide cities, countries, and entire nations. But kindness can break it, and it only takes one act. One soldier, one meal, one choice. Wars are built by leaders, but peace is built by ordinary people. Like Rodriguez, like the man who saved a family by remembering what it felt like to be hungry. Like the family who learned that mercy is stronger than fear. Like every person who sees the wooden bird and chooses, in their own life, to do the same. Because kindness does not end. It echoes. It travels through generations. It changes everything. Not all at once, but one heart at a time. And that is how this story really ends. Not in a basement, not in Texas, not in a museum, but wherever someone chooses compassion over hate. Wherever someone remembers that people are just people. Wherever one person decides to be human, even when the world is not. There is a rule in history that isn't written in books. Most of the people who change the world will never know they did. They will never see the results. They will never hear the stories. They will never meet the people whose lives they saved. They will never learn how far a single act of kindness traveled. Rodriguez never saw the full impact of what he did. He never knew that his small moment in a ruined German basement became a chain reaction stretching across decades. But it did. It happened in classrooms, in family dinners, in the way the Klein children raised their own children. It happened in the subjects they chose to study, in the books they wrote, in the people they helped, and in the lives they touched. Klaus became a professor of international conflict. Generals, diplomats, and soldiers attended his lectures. They took notes as he explained how war begins not with bullets, but with words, with lies, with fear, with the belief that the other side is less than human. He always ended his courses the same way. Do not let someone else tell you who your enemy is. And every year, someone in that room carried that idea forward into the world. Greta became a teacher known for telling the truth. She refused to let textbooks soften history. She told her students what she had seen and learned as a child. Propaganda doesn't just change minds, it changes hearts. Her students grew up grounded, skeptical of hate, unwilling to accept stereotypes. Some became journalists, some became scientists, some became leaders. But every single one learned the same lesson. It is easy to hate strangers. It is harder to hate someone once you know their story. Helga became an artist. She used paint the way others use language. Her art was not just beauty, it was memory. She painted the basement, the bread, the soldier, the fear, the moment everything changed. Her work appeared in galleries, in newspapers, in books. People stood in front of her paintings and said things like, "I never thought about the war that way." Because art does what history rarely can. It makes strangers feel. And Anna lived her entire life remembering the soldier who saved her. She became a mother and grandmother who taught kindness not as an idea, but as a rule. Her children never learned hate. They never learned nationalism. They were raised on a different kind of patriotism. The belief that courage is not about fighting enemies, but about protecting humanity. The wooden bird stayed on her shelf as a reminder, not of war, not of hunger, but of hope. Generations passed, and every once in a while, the descendants of the Kleins and the Rodriguezes still gather on that Texas farm. It is bigger now. The small house has grown, not because of the land, but because of the family. On warm evenings, They sit outside under the string lights, telling children the story again. The story that came before them. The story they are now part of. No one uses the word miracle. No one uses the word hero. Because the story is not about greatness. It is about a choice. Sometimes history focuses on leaders and battles and maps. But in this story, none of that mattered. Not the flags, not the uniforms, not the politics, not the speeches, not even the victory. What changed history was simpler. A man saw hungry children and chose compassion instead of fear. That choice became a family. That family became a legacy. That legacy became a reminder that the greatest power on earth is not violence, but humanity. And this is the final lesson of the story. We cannot always control the world we inherit, but we can always control how we treat the people in it. A war can be started by hate, but peace? Peace is always started by kindness. In basements, in farms, in museums, in schools, in families, in moments that seem small. Today, visitors still walk past the wooden bird in that museum. They read the letter. They see the carving. They stand in silence trying to imagine the basement, the fear, the hunger, the soldier. Most of them do not cry, but almost all of them leave thinking differently, and that is enough. Because the story isn't just about the Kleins or the Rodriguezes. It isn't just about war. It isn't just about Germany or America or Texas. It is about us. It is about the world we are shaping right now. We are all one decision away from becoming another Rodriguez. One moment where we choose compassion over indifference. One moment where we see people instead of enemies. One moment of courage that says, I cannot fix the whole world, but I can fix this. And maybe, just maybe, someone else will carry that moment forward, the way the Kleins did, the way thousands of people who saw the wooden bird did, the way you are now. Because kindness never ends where it starts. It keeps going. It changes the world one story at a time. And this story isn't over. It lives in anyone who remembers that the greatest victory is not the end of a war. It's the beginning of compassion. Every generation inherits two things from the past: the wounds it caused and the lessons it left behind. Some families inherit anger. Some inherit pride. Some inherit silence. The Kleins and the Rodriguezes inherited something else, something rare, the proof that one moment of mercy can rewrite everything. That story did not end in the 1940s or the 1950s or even the 1990s. It became part of the way these families live, part of how they raise their children, part of how they shape the world around them. And the truth is, the world today is not so different from the world Rodriguez marched into. There are still wars. There is still propaganda. There is still division and fear. There are still people being told to hate others they've never met. The enemy simply looks different now, but the lesson remains unchanged. Imagine this: two families, once separated by oceans, stand together decades later. Not because they share nationality or race or language, but because they share something greater: humanity. At family reunions, no one remembers who came from Germany or who came from Mexico or who came from Texas. No one cares. It stopped mattering long ago. What matters instead are the things they teach their children. Help when you can. Protect the vulnerable. Treat the stranger like a neighbor. Refuse to be told who you should hate. At those gatherings, someone always tells the story of the wooden bird. Not because it was carved perfectly, but because it carved something into history. The belief that kindness is stronger than hatred. One night, as the next generation of children sit around a picnic table, one of them asks, "Why did he do it? Why did that American soldier help?" And the oldest member of the family answers, "Because he remembered that hunger does not care about borders." That's the truth that never changes. Rodriguez never knew his small choice would ripple forward. He never knew that his name would be spoken by people decades later. He never knew that a wooden bird would become a symbol for something larger than the war itself. He was just a man who saw starving children and thought, "I can fix this." I can make this moment better. I don't need anyone's permission to act like a human being. That is the real legacy. Not the bird in the museum, not the letters, not the documented story. The legacy is the idea that you do not have to wait for the world to change before you do. You can be the change. You can be the Rodriguez in someone's life. Maybe that is the single greatest lesson the Kleins ever learned. They taught it to their children and grandchildren, that kindness is not an act of weakness. It is an act of courage. It takes more strength to help a stranger than to hate one. It is harder to extend a hand than to raise a fist. But the world changes when someone does. And the more you hear their story, the more you understand something essential about life. Every time you treat another person with kindness, you become part of the same legacy. Every time you refuse to see a stranger as an enemy, you are choosing what Rodriguez chose. Every time you feed someone who is hungry, physically or emotionally, you are adding another chapter to the same story. Because in the end, this isn't really a story about war or hunger or survival. It's a story about choice. The choice to be kind in a world that rewards cruelty. The choice to see humanity where others see danger. The choice to act when everyone else looks away. It's the choice that separates the people who rebuild the world from the people who break it. And that choice is available to every generation, including ours. We don't know when the next act of compassion will happen. We don't know who will carry the story forward. It might be a stranger on a street corner. It might be a teacher, a parent, a soldier, a nurse, a child. It might be you, because kindness doesn't begin in museums or history books. It doesn't start on battlefields or in textbooks. It starts quietly in the hearts of ordinary people. People who remember hunger. People who remember fear. People who remember humanity when the world forgets. That is the legacy that keeps echoing. And maybe one day, someone will tell your story the way this one was told. Maybe someone will say, "You changed everything for me." Maybe your kindness will become someone else's wooden bird. One day, far in the future, someone may hold that memory and say, "Or this is where hope began." Stories don't survive because they are written down. Stories survive because someone believes in them enough to tell them to the next person. They survive because someone hears the truth inside them and carries it forward. The story of the Klein family and Private Daniel Rodriguez survived almost by accident. It wasn't in textbooks. It wasn't taught in school. It wasn't celebrated in museums for decades. It lived in memories. It lived in conversations at kitchen tables. It lived in the hearts of the people who were transformed by it. It survived because people refused to let it die. It survived because it mattered. And one day someone shared it again, this time with you. Maybe you read this story sitting at home, scrolling through a screen. Maybe you heard it in a video. Maybe you stumbled upon it when you weren't looking for anything except distraction. But what you found instead is the same choice that started everything long ago in a ruined German basement. Do you believe in kindness? Not the easy kind. Not the pretty kind. Not the polite kind. The real kind. The kind that costs something. The kind that asks you to risk looking foolish. To risk being wrong. To risk being the first person in the room to care. The kind Rodriguez chose. Most of us want the world to be better. But history is a reminder. The world doesn't change because everyone suddenly becomes good. It changes because one person decides not to accept the world as it is. The world changes one heart at a time. And that means the story isn't about the Kleins anymore. It's about you. Ask yourself something. Who would you have been in 1945? The father hiding in fear? The mother trying to protect her children? The child who didn't understand? The soldier who chose compassion anyway? None of those answers is wrong. Fear is human. Despair is human. Survival is human. But so is kindness. So is courage. So is love. Those things don't belong to one country or one culture or one moment in history. They belong to everyone. They are available to every generation. They are available now, to you. Maybe you will never face a starving family in a basement. maybe your choices will seem smaller. The coworker who needs someone to listen. The neighbor struggling to pay for groceries. The friend whose life is falling apart. The stranger on the street who needs a hand. Maybe your war won't be fought with bombs and soldiers. Maybe your war is fought against loneliness, against division, against cruelty, against silence. Those battles are just as real, and one moment of mercy can matter just as much. We think history is written by presidents and generals, but history is built by ordinary people. People like Rodriguez, people like the teacher who kept the bird safe, the daughter who carried the memory, the family who kept telling the truth, the museum that kept the story alive, the stranger who shared it again. People like you might never see the results of your kindness. You might never know what it changes. You might never hear the stories that come after. But Rodriguez didn't know either. He didn't know that one act of mercy would travel across oceans and generations. He didn't know it would shape the lives of children not yet born. He didn't know it would end up in a museum. He didn't need to know, because kindness doesn't ask for recognition. It just asks for courage. One day, someone may tell your story. They may say, "He didn't turn away. She didn't stay silent. They made the choice when no one else would." Maybe there will be no museum. Maybe there will be no letter. Maybe all that remains will be a memory. But memories are powerful. Someone remembered Rodriguez. Someone remembered the bird. Someone remembered the moment the war ended in a basement. And because of that, you remember too. So this is the part of the story where the narrator steps back, where the spotlight shifts, where the echo becomes a question. What will you do with the world as it is? What will you choose? Hate is easy. Indifference is easy. Silence is easy. Kindness is harder, but kindness is stronger. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to step forward and say, "I can't fix everything, but I can fix this moment." Just like the soldier did. Just like the Kleins did. Just like you can. Because this story didn't survive to tell you what happened. It survived to remind you what is possible. So if you carry anything from it, carry this. One act of kindness can change a life. One life can change a family. One family can change a generation. One generation can change the world. And maybe the next chapter starts with you. In the end, history is not just made of dates and events. It is made of mirrors. It forces us to see ourselves, our fears, our failures, our fragile humanity. It forces us to face a truth we keep trying to avoid. The greatest threat to the world has never been nations. It has always been what people believe about each other. For thousands of years, we have fought the same war over and over again. Not because we want to, but because it is easier to repeat the past than to change it. We still fear strangers. We still listen to propaganda. We still divide people into us and them. We still treat differences like danger, and every generation has the same choice. Do we let fear win, or do we choose compassion? The Kleins answered that question. Rodriguez answered that question. But the world still hasn't. Imagine the basement again, not in 1945. Today, different country, different war, different victims, same fear, different soldier, same choice. History repeats because people forget the lesson. War doesn't begin when the first bomb falls. It begins when we forget the other person is human. It begins with a voice on the radio, a headline, a speech, a stereotype, a rumor. It begins when someone says, "They're not like us. They don't deserve mercy. They are the enemy." It begins the moment we believe that lie, and it ends the moment someone refuses to. People often ask, what ended the war? They want an answer with numbers and names. They want something measurable. Troops, treaties, leaders, weapons. But the truth is smaller and bigger than that. Wars don't end because armies surrender. Wars end when people begin to see each other again. Not as flags, not as enemies, as human beings. That is what Rodriguez did in a basement in Hamburg. He didn't ask if those children were German. He didn't ask if they were on the wrong side of history. He simply saw hunger. He saw fear, and he refused to walk away. That is what ends wars. Not guns, not governments. Humanity. When the Holocaust Museum displays the wooden bird, no one sees a victory. They see a warning. The bird is more than a memory of kindness. It is a reminder of how close we came to losing our humanity entirely. A reminder that when we stop seeing people as people, anything becomes possible. Genocide, hate, slavery, war. The bird is there to keep us from forgetting, because forgetting is how it happens again. We like to believe we would be the hero in history. We like to think we would be Rodriguez, the one who helped, the one who did the right thing, the one who risked punishment to save a stranger. But the truth is uncomfortable. Most of us would have been like Friedrich in the beginning, afraid, misled, certain of the wrong things. And that is why the story matters, because it says something more powerful than heroes exist. It says, you can choose again. You can change, even if you believed the wrong things yesterday, even if you were afraid, even if you were taught to hate. You can choose humanity today. Maybe that is the real victory of the story. Not that the Klein family survived, not that they moved to Texas, not that the wooden bird ended up in a museum. The real victory is that a lie was broken, hatred lost, just once, in one basement, by one young soldier, and everything after that was changed. If it happened once, it can happen again. So this is how the story truly ends, not with a funeral, not with a museum, not with a moral written on a plaque. It ends with a question that history keeps asking us. Will we remember the lesson? When we see someone different, will we fear them or feed them? When someone needs help, will we look away or step forward? When the world tells us who to hate, will we listen or think for ourselves? When the moment comes, and it always comes, will we choose kindness? Because kindness is not a chapter in the story. It is the story. It is the beginning of peace. It is the end of war. It is the only thing that has ever saved us. And the truth is simple. We do not need more heroes. We just need more people willing to be human. The story's over, but the lesson is not. It lives on in you.